Hey everybody, this is Mark. Welcome back. And in this video today, I am going to be wearing some hats. So here's one hat I got from Russia. I get things that I collect from all over the world, different places that I've been. Here's a necklace that I got from when I was in the Gambia. I've got this tin over here that I picked up from Britain. And in here, all sorts of things, like a bracelet from Turkey. Right? I get things from all over the world here, and I enjoy it. And I'll tell you too, back to the hats, some of you are going to think that I'm being ridiculous by wearing what you will think are silly hats. On the other hand, some of you probably will be offended because maybe my use of hats might be somehow culturally offensive. That is not the purpose of this video. My purpose today is to share with you aspects of culture, to talk to you a little bit about what it's like when you go to different places. Maybe it's for business purposes and you're trying to conduct deals, or maybe it's for purposes of trying to develop marketing plans and trying to figure out, or HR plans, trying to figure out how do you avoid cultural pitfalls. Or maybe you're an expatriate and you're going somewhere overseas and you're going to see some things that are very unusual. So my purpose here is to talk about those things that are unusual, maybe confront you with some ideas that may be unusual to you, and in doing so, hopefully prepare you to be able to handle differences across cultures. So let's do this thing. By the way, if you like what we're doing here, please like and subscribe, share this video with others, and leave some comments. If you've got some questions, if you've got some other stuff you'd like me to teach you about, I'd be happy to do that. And finally, if you really want the full immersive experience, come on over to the University of St. Mary. Join the MBA program where I teach, or just come around here. It's a great experience, it's a great environment, and I'd love to guide you on your educational journey. As I said before, the theme of this video is culture, and so we're going to be talking a lot about cultural differences. And a lot of it is going to be told really from my perspective. I've traveled a lot of places around the world, I have lots of stories to tell, and I hope that through some of these stories you will get a sense of what it's like to live and work in other parts of the world, and hopefully understand maybe some of the differences and how you might adapt those differences if you end up moving someplace. I will now want to talk about this hat that I'm wearing, okay? Because I came out and I found you guys. As soon as you saw me, there was like, it's the laughter, it's the giggles, right? So now I have to ask you, why were you giggling at me? It was unexpected, okay? If I had darker skin and was wearing this thing and going through an airport in certain parts of America, what kinds of attitudes do you think people might have?
People would judge.
Islamophobic stuff?
Yep.
Absolutely. Okay. If I wear something like this and I'm in Egypt, is that inappropriate? It might be, or maybe it's not. I've been in mosques at different parts of the world, and if so, I have to dress modestly and appropriately and take off my shoes when I go into the place, right? My wife has to wear a veil, right? It's like and take off her shoes, we have to adhere to their customs and we have to be flexible. And just because we have an attitude about certain things here in this context doesn't mean that it's not appropriate in certain other contexts. But sometimes dressing like a local isn't necessarily offensive depending on your circumstance, right? So for instance, this is a picture of a Filipino barong, and I got one when I was there. And when you engage in business, this is acceptable. Like whether you are a Filipino, whether you're not a Filipino, at least when I was there anyway, it would have been appropriate for somebody from any cultural background to do it, and it was sort of a sign of respect. You're sort of accepting their culture and you're sort of blending in, and that's the way it is. Bring up this Russian hat that I will sometimes wear, right? This is sort of a stereotypical picture. I don't want to take off my headscarf yet, but I'll be totally ridiculous here. But this is sort of a stereotypical hat that one might associate with people from Russia or Eastern Europe, right? But the fact is it's actually just a really nice hat. It keeps your ears super warm in the winter. I mean, there's nothing better than this thing. There's something very, very practical about it. You do it like this, a little more like Christmas Vacation, right?
I was gonna say, it's not giving a Russian vibe anymore.
Hey! Clark! I will say about this headscarf, I got this thing in Egypt. And the reason that I got it was out of necessity, not out of some sort of tourist impulse. So I'll tell you the story. I was hiking through the desert. We were on camels part of the time, hiking part of the time. And I was with this group of people, and I was trying to take care of myself American style, right? I had a baseball hat on, I had a bandana covering my face, and the fact is that as we were hiking through canyons, it's like if the wind was blowing, sand was going absolutely everywhere. It was in your eyes, nose, ears, whatever. And when the wind wasn't blowing, there were flies everywhere, eyes, nose, ears, and everything. And it was just really difficult. And I'm sorry, but the bandana and the baseball hat were not doing it. The baseball hat was making me super sweaty, and the bandana did not have enough coverage or thickness to really deal with that. And neither were really appropriate sun covering. They didn't breathe in the way that they needed to. So we stopped at a Bedouin camp, and of course, as you'd expect, like there's loads of these people like out of tents, just like, here, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this, right? And so they're like saying, one of the guys is basically like, dude, you should get one of these things because this is what the locals use and this is why they use it. So they taught me how to tie it in this particular way. I didn't do a great job this time. And it's here so that I can really cover up my face. And I have the option. I can take it off, I can take it down, it breathes well. I mean, this thing is very, very practical. And that's why people wear it. It's not necessarily something that is identifiable with a specific culture. Now, I will say that this particular form of headwear has cultural implications. So there are different Bedouin tribes that may tie it differently or may have a different pattern. This is Yasser Arafat. He's dead now, but he was the leader of the Palestinian Liberation Organization many years ago. Has something that's very different, it's similar, but it's different. He actually has sort of a band around that, which oftentimes signifies royalty or elitism or something. The poorer people in the tribes kind of just tie it up. And so there's differences sometimes in the way that they are presented. It would not be inappropriate for me. In fact, it was absolutely accepted for me to be in the desert with these tribes wearing this hat because it would be stupid if I did not. Okay? However, if I were in a business negotiation, this would be a really stupid thing for me to wear. Okay? I don't know if it would offend my Egyptian business friends or not, but this is not what they expect from American business people, right? So they expect somebody who's going to be dressed like this and look like this. And so the idea of me sort of wearing like Arab robes and a scarf and all that sort of stuff, not appropriate in that sort of circumstance, even though my going in a barong in the Philippines would be appropriate there. So what I'm trying to tell you is that we Americans have our own assumptions about what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. Would it be appropriate for me to run around with one of these things on my head in most classrooms most of the time? Probably not. Why am I doing it? Right, I'm trying to make a point, and hopefully the point is one that we need to be open and flexible and understanding. Right? Now, I have enough cultural sensitivity to know that there's certain situations that I probably shouldn't do that in, and learning in a classroom is one, but there's others where it's not. But this is culturally constructed, right? So the object of your game here is to try to figure out what is and what is not appropriate in a certain circumstance. And so I like coming in here and having people sort of like, oh, wow. Part of it is not just, for the reasons that you stated. Part of it is because it's the sense of someone's breaking a cultural norm. somebody's doing something that I'm not used to. And that's a special thing to have happen in a classroom, right? Because that's what this cultural discussion is all about. You go to another country, and there's going to be a whole lot of people doing a whole lot of things that break your norms. And you have to get used to it. So here's another question. Did you get used to the fact this thing was on my head after a while? Did you kind of forget about it? All right, we can be more flexible than we think sometimes, right? I mean, those things that we think, oh my gosh, I don't think I can deal with that, that's so different, right? You know, the human beings are flexible. We can be anyway, right? We can be more accepting. And we can sometimes accept other ways that are cool, different, special, right? So, you know, I'm bringing this up not to be offensive, but hopefully to open your minds to the fact that there's all sorts of ways to interpret things and all sorts of people practicing their cultures in really beautiful ways. How does the world perceive Americans, right? We've been talking a little bit about how we see the world and maybe some of our misconceptions of that, but how do you think people in different parts of the world see us? There are certain mannerisms or certain things that Americans do that I think are somewhat noticeable. There was a guy's friend of mine, a Brit that, I was friends with, and he told me different things that you would identify an American at 50 yards, and here's how. And one of them is they're loud, right? And that's something that I noticed too. Like if you go into a restaurant in, almost anywhere in Europe, I mean, the Italians can be a little loud, but I think this was actually a place in Italy where it was like a nice, quiet restaurant and something, and my wife and I are sitting there and we're eating, and there's lots of other people who are around, are locals, and they're just sort of like, kind of talking down here at this level, trying to stuff. Next thing you know, this big American family comes in, and it's like, hey, well, like, it's just, hey, welcome to Applebee's. It's fancy like. Americans smile. We smile a lot. And it's not like we're the only country in the world that does this. I mean, there's lots of places throughout the world, especially the developing world, that smile as much as we do or more, right? But there are certain places in Europe, and especially I think the further east you go, like into Eastern Europe and Russia and stuff like that, it's like a completely different vibe, right? It's like I saw this a little bit in France, but mostly it was like off in Eastern Europe and Russia, where you're walking down the street and people just like either not look at you or they'll give you a scowl. But again, I'm not sure that's necessarily such a bad thing, because it's subjective, right? There's also something positive about maybe having, we'll call it good customer service, all right? So like when I was living in Wales, I was connected to a Rotary Club, lots of these business people and stuff like that. And there's a woman named Chrissy. She was a consultant. And she was trying to get British businesses to take on more of an American approach to customer service. Because the assumption in Britain largely is not the customer is always right, but I will help you if I feel like it.
I like that.
And it takes it takes a special sort of an American culture to sort of create this idea that most of the people have to be nice most of the time to strangers that come into my store, and that you have to smile at them and be friendly to them and help them out as much as possible. I mean, when I went to Russia, for example, you go into a place and they're like, we're closed, we're taking a nap, go away, come back later. It's completely different. And I think there is something positive about maybe, and maybe a little silly, maybe a little Pollyanna-ish, but it's I don't know, it's one of our better traits, I think. We could be really mean and really kind of dour, but yeah. But, hey, what are you doing? You're running into me, huh? What are you bothering me? What?
Yes.
And then we've got this, we're Midwest nice.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to point out there's different subcultures in the United States. We are different from one place to another, and that's something else. So we've got, what do we say, loud. We've got some aspects about what we wear, right? You're saying the golf shirts and so on, white socks a lot.
True. It's the tube socks.
I say jeans, but lots of people wear jeans throughout the world, but Americans have a special relationship with jeans. I think that is different and unique. We got the white socks and the white shoes and the sweatshirts and the, said all those kinds of things. Oh, the other thing is like we walk with really big steps. So.
I think we're seen to be unhealthy.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Absolutely.
We are much larger than the people throughout the world, you know, in terms of our weights. Less healthy, generally. It's because our healthcare system's so awesome. So they got a giggle out of that. That's great. We'll talk about healthcare in a couple of weeks. We'll get there. It'll be fun. Yeah, global travelers are going to be usually people with money, right? You cannot travel without some money, and so, yeah. There may be a bit of arrogance, a bit of like I can throw my money around and get whatever I want. If I don't like what I'm getting, then I'm going to complain about it, sort of thing. And I think there probably is something to that. I kind of alluded to this before when I addressed the question of would you rather be in Disney World or in London, right? And I think that most Americans believe the world is like Disney World, and that's the way they want to treat it. It's like Disney World is a great place to go. You can experience all these things, but like everybody speaks English and everybody bends over backwards for you, and there's a cast member to take care of your every whim, you know. Why don't I get that when I go to Germany? Why don't they speak English? Why aren't they like they are in America? I want the Germany that's like America. I want the Epcot Germany. The world has a love-hate relationship with the United States and its many products and services. There are a lot of products that people around the world absolutely love. Disney, a lot of our action movies, Marvels. Think about a lot of the brands that come out in terms of movies, music, blue jeans, Coca-Cola. And a lot of these things really give America a positive image, right? This is soft power. This is the kind of thing that allows the United States to be influential because it's we have so much that a lot of people want. Certainly, we're admired for our form of government in many parts of the world, but we're also admired for many of the products and services and entertainment forms that we produce. At the same time, some of these same entertainment forms create a lot of consternation among certain populations, particularly more conservative elements in many cultures. Think about the violent content that comes out in a lot of American programming. Think about the sexual content. Just like many people who are more conservative in the United States have some problems with this, just imagine how this works out when people in the Muslim world are seeing that, and how, you know, maybe they would have some common ground with some of the conservatives in the United States in terms of thinking that, you know, these are elements of entertainment that they don't approve of, that they don't think should be out there. And violence isn't limited just to the way that it's portrayed on television. It also has to do with a lot of what people know about the United States. Well, I was in a British pub one time. I was talking to one of the locals, and they were asking me about America, and I was like saying, oh yeah, just answering questions, sort of talking about the better parts of it. And I'm like, well, you should go sometime. And they're like, I could never go to America. Well, why couldn't you go to America? Because it's so violent there. Like, yeah, you know, not as, you know, they're like, no. I mean, and they're talking about all the things they see on TV and the movies and on the news and everything. And I'm like, yeah, but I mean, London's violent and Birmingham's violent. I mean, like, there's bad areas of town. It's like that's true of any. Oh no, I get killed over there. A lot of reporting from news sources, some of it accurate and perhaps some of it distorted. People are very familiar with the gun culture in the United States, for example, and it causes them some concern. And there is some accuracy to this. The United States has far more gun violence than every other developed country in the world, a lot more crime. And so those give people some pause. So it's valid, but the idea that, you know, I could be walking down the streets in Johnson County and just be randomly mugged by somebody was a little bit, you know, a little far-fetched anyway. Not impossible, but not very likely though either. But again, these things are being fed by media, the culture that's sort of, you know, American culture that sort of spreads throughout the world, and sometimes it's really cool and fun stuff, and sometimes it's stuff that is not completely accurate and not very flattering. The question of cultural imperialism also has been a cultural challenge and sort of a source of skepticism about the intrusive nature of American culture. Think about the Forbidden City in China, which is apparently no longer so forbidden. It's a tourist area, and in fact, there's a Starbucks inside the Forbidden City. Yes, this structure that's thousands of years old, and there it is. And I'll tell you a personal story. I went to see the pyramids in Egypt, and it's amazing. You go out there, and there's desert as far as the eye can see, and then there are these huge pyramids, and you just about feel like you're in the middle of nowhere until you turn around, turn your back on the pyramids, and there is the KFC just sitting right there on the other side. So convenient for us tourists just to sort of go in and grab our fried chicken. So a lot of these cultural sites are subject to encroachment of capitalistic products that are produced by the United States and maybe cause a little tension anyway. Another potentially divisive problem is politics. I want to tell you a personal story. I was living in the UK during 9/11. And I was actually working in the UK at the time of the terrorist bombings in London on July the 7th, 2005. I had actually just landed in London on that very day. I took a bunch of students on an international study, and when we arrived there, the city had gone crazy. Instead of being able to take the tube to the London School of Economics where we were studying, we had to get on a bus to take us this roundabout way. And you can imagine I was with a lot of high school students. Parents were freaking out. It was just absolutely nuts. It was the King's Cross station that got the worst of it. And so that was right next to the dormitories where we were going to stay. And that would have been the station we had gone into. And if we'd gotten there like 20, 30 minutes earlier, we probably would have been in that bombing. Lots of people were killed in it. So it was a close call. I want to talk about this because having been in another country during these terrorist attacks, it gives you a different kind of a perspective, especially during 9/11. The amount of goodwill that was poured out by the British, it was so sympathetic to the United States. It was incredible. They flew the American flag above Buckingham Palace. It's practically unheard of for a country to raise the flag of another country over one of their buildings of state. So the United States, in the meantime, invaded Afghanistan, which they had the support of the world of, and then they invaded Iraq. And because of the way that went down, the Iraq invasion, how it came through with a lot of lack of support and lack of consultation, there were huge problems. George W. Bush had lost much of the goodwill that the United States had created. All of that sympathy just evaporated. You could feel it as you were traveling, or as I was traveling, through the world during that time period. You could see the difference that it made in social and business relations. When I was out there, I was indistinguishable from the President of the United States. People just associated me with this decision maker who made decisions that were so unpopular throughout the world. It caused people to look at me in a certain way. Within a year after 9/11, I was in Egypt, negotiating in a souk. I was trying to negotiate with some Egyptian guys, and I'll tell you, they gave me an earful about American imperialism and the plight of the Palestinians and how it was all America's fault. It made it extremely difficult to do any kind of business or build social relationships in this situation. I'm telling you about this because as you get involved in international business or diplomacy or travel or whatever you're doing, sometimes these political things can get in the way of your ability to try to negotiate things or to try to just build relationships. Once they know what your nationality is, they are going to be associated with whoever is in charge. There are some presidents who have been very popular. Barack Obama, Joe Biden have had a lot of support from the world. George W. Bush and Donald Trump, not so much. You like them, you don't have to like them, but it is a reality that that's a challenging situation. So the question is, how do you succeed when people have a bad attitude about where you come from and who your political leaders are? So a key question you always have to reckon with is, how are you going to overcome these odds? And political odds aren't the only one, right? We've already talked about how people have attitudes about and stereotypes sometimes about Americans. How do you adjust to that? Well, this is, you can't really control who your leaders are. I mean, you can say, hey, I didn't vote for them, but that isn't necessarily going to help. Is that you try to rely upon identities that are larger than national cultural differences. So think about what it is that you do have in common with whoever you're dealing with, whoever you're befriending, whoever you're negotiating with. I think about the things that I have in common with others, right? I'm a parent, I'm a father, right? So if I'm dealing with someone else who also has kids, you talk about family, try to focus on that, try to build a commonality, because the ways that you feel about your kids are going to be very similar to the way people in other countries, the way that they feel about their kids too. You can go to sports, if you can find a common team or some sort of a rivalry or something that you can draw upon that people feel very strongly about, they can bring you together, that's another opportunity. Think about other sorts of interests. The point is that everybody has their own identities. Everybody has these things that they ways in which they define themselves. And so identity can be a very divisive thing. It can be very us versus them in terms of politics and sometimes national culture as well. But it can also be a uniting thing if you can find those things that you have in common with others. So that's the end of our video, but that's not all I have to say about culture. I originally thought I'd try to wrap up this video and just throw all the cultural stuff all into one, but man, there's just so much. So I'm going to get at least another couple of videos to cover some of the other aspects of culture that I think are really important. So in this one, we were talking quite a bit about how we perceive people from other cultures, how other people perceive us, how sometimes that breaks norms and challenges what we think, how it sometimes makes us uncomfortable, and then how we have to figure out how to navigate that, right? How do we change our mind in order to come in the middle to try to meet somebody else? And how can we hope maybe that they're going to meet us in the middle too? So that was a big theme for this video. But some of the other things that I also want to talk about are, as opposed to just differences in cultural attitudes, I want to talk more about differences in cultural behaviors and the kinds of things that we have to be prepared for there. And finally, at some point, I also want to talk a little bit about what it's like to live in another country. Right? What is the process of culture shock, and how do you deal with that? So eventually we'll come around to that as well. For now, that's all we got. And until next time on Beyond Profit, a global perspective, I will see you later. Talk to you soon.